Welcome to the Target stream for Mint Press News. I'm your host, Robert Inlakesh. As always, thank you to everyone for joining us. Israel's attempt to seize the strategic Adi al-Tahrir Hills in southern Lebanon has failed yet again as Hezbollah continues to pick off the battalion leadership responsible for the infamous killing of Hind Rajab in the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, the negotiations between Iran and the US continue. Will there be a deal? Has the Greater Israel Project truly been defeated? Well, we'll get into all of that. But before we begin, the Target stream is 100% viewer funded. As a show in the last 2 years, we were financially targeted and banned by PayPal, and our fundraisers were taken down by Indiegogo and GoFundMe. They even withheld our funds. So we are looking for 300 new members to keep this news show alive. You can join us at Mint Press on Patreon or right here on YouTube and join our membership program. So everyone is aware we're live streaming the same time, 4 p.m. CST every Monday and Thursday to keep you constantly updated on what is going on. So we've got quite a bit to go through as usual here, and we'll get right into what's happening with the negotiations because that is what is currently being spoken about, but we're going to get into, of course, what's actually been happening on the ground because those two things are obviously very, very different. That being said, there's been somewhat of a sea change amongst the Israeli, at least the Israeli public, in terms of their view of what's been going on in Lebanon and whether they are indeed the victors. So the Trump administration appears to be forcing on the Israelis, at least this is how it's being presented, that they are supposed to adhere to a specific roadmap, and also they're going to establish a mechanism, a deconfliction cell between the two parties, that being Lebanon and Israel, but really this would mean Hezbollah and Israel, that they dial down the fighting until it comes to a complete halt in Lebanon, thus actually implementing a ceasefire. Now, we've heard multiple times that there has been a ceasefire in Lebanon, at least 6 times now, I believe. They've declared a ceasefire, and that has not actually gone into effect. But something very interesting is happening because of the fact that the Israelis now are, despite Netanyahu again today pledging that the Israeli military will not withdraw from southern Lebanon, he has had to limit greatly his operations and the military's operations inside of Lebanon. And that's because of Iran. Iran is the reason why Israel can't bomb Beirut. They haven't struck back at Beirut, even when they did bomb Beirut twice. One of those times bringing on an Iranian direct retaliation, they didn't do massive strikes. So Iran's threat of attacking the Israelis with ballistic missiles is enough to deter them from striking the capital of Lebanon. Now, the threat of Iranian intervention, which Iran has threatened to intervene in Lebanon against the Israelis because of their role in Lebanon, their refusal to give up the occupation of Lebanese territory, that threat has materialized in the Israelis at least scaling down their operations. Now, again, Israel is not saying that they're going to withdraw from Lebanese territory, which ultimately will collapse any deal, because the first clause is to end the war on all fronts. If Israel is continuing to invade Lebanese territory, then that's not on all fronts. So the war cannot end. But to give you a taste of what the Israelis have been facing, satellite imagery recently came out. This is from the port of Ashdod, or what the Israelis call Ashdod. And this appears to be the results of an Iranian ballistic missile strike on fuel tankers there. Now, keep in mind, senior Israeli officials have spoken out and said that if we did know the true nature of Iran's missile strikes and their capabilities and what they inflicted, the public would be horrified. And that's why the Israelis have not ultimately agreed to release all of the information about what has been struck. And this goes back to what was revealed openly last week by Plus 972 Mag, where they put in a Freedom of Information request, and they found that the Israeli military censor was blocking 15 articles a day from coming out. So in terms of what they are revealing has been struck at Israeli military sites, the number of casualties, all of this, we can confidently say that the Israelis are hiding an enormous amount, because the Israelis, when you want to report something, if you are part of the Israeli media, you have to go, if it's deemed to be affiliated with anything to do with security and of security concerns, you have to submit your story as a journalist, as a media outlet, an Israeli media outlet, to the military censor. So you had to go to the Israeli military and ask them to clear it for you. So when you're seeing any reports come out of the Israeli media, do keep that in mind, that everything you're seeing that is serious and has real world consequences has been cleared by a military censor when you're looking at the Israeli media. That's something. And it's not only that. You can imagine this culture of clearing things with a military censor, the interconnectivity between journalists and the military there, how that affects Israeli journalists abroad and what stories they are reporting as well. That's another thing to keep in mind. But all of that being said, new information emerged. Last week, I believe, we might have covered the fact that around 64% of Israelis said that they believe Iran won the war. Now, a new poll has been conducted amongst Israelis. 92% of them say that Iran emerged as the winner of the war with the US, the war and the deal, which is enormous. Now, some people might look at that and think, we're going to put this up on the screen here. Some people might look at that and think to themselves, well, that's just the Israeli population. What does it matter how they think or feel about who won the war? That doesn't mean anything. That doesn't have any implications. Well, it has enormous implications, especially right now, because the Israelis are coming up to an election. Now, just for comparison here, this, back in the right after the war with Iran, the 12-day war, the Israelis were polled a number of times. So this is in 2025 when Israel attacked Iran and the war went for 12 days. The vast majority of the Israelis favored the war before, during, and after. And afterwards, there were polls that came out and the Israeli public had openly told pollsters that they were happy overwhelmingly with the military and the government's actions during the war and handling of the war. They were happy. This time, 92% of them believe that they lost against Iran, which is enormous. And a large part of this, if you're going to look at how they are being impacted psychologically, a large part of this is to do with Lebanon, realistically speaking. And the Israelis right now, again, coming up to an election later this year, they're going to be looking at this. And Netanyahu, again, will be in the hot seat. So a lot of people are asking questions as to whether this deal will go through, whether it's serious this time, whether we should believe it. And I would say we should always be skeptical of anything coming out. But one thing that I have observed is that there does seem to be a level of pushback right now that is making Netanyahu in particular and his government look incredibly bad. Now, in a way, yes, it's targeted at Netanyahu, but if for whatever reason this conflict simply freezes and Iran maintains the leverage that it does. It extracts some of the concessions. It doesn't get all of them. And we sort of are in a state of limbo where the US is not fully committed to ending the war, but it just doesn't want to continue because of the reality on the ground of what it will face and having no good options. Even if that plays out, that scenario plays out, the Israelis and their Greater Israel project is virtually finished. And I've said this a number of times, but the only way Israel, if this is going to be the outcome, that Iran is going to get what they're saying it's going to get, even in part, the only way that Israel continues to exist is if it withdraws from Lebanese, Syrian territory, withdraws from Gaza and the West Bank, and signs a deal for a so-called two-state solution with the Palestinians. That is not a solution which is favorable to the vast preponderance of the Palestinian people. It's a deal which would save Israel. It's a pro-Israel deal, is a two-state solution. If they don't do that, I think they fall apart. And I think internally, you're going to start to see them falling apart more and more. And we'll get into what's been happening, and we'll get into what's been going on the battlefield and a number of different things that are suggesting this in just a moment. But there's a number of clips that have come out today. The first one we're going to look at is the Iranian negotiating team, which landed in Switzerland and negotiated with their American counterparts. When they arrived, Abbas Araghchi walked past J.D. Vance and refused to shake his hand. And this is J.D. Vance being asked about that.
There was a moment yesterday when Araghchi came into the room and did not greet you. You guys did not shake hands, and then he walked out of the room. Did you feel snubbed by that? Did you feel it was an intentional move on their part? How did you interpret what happened?
No, I mean, I trust me, I've spent a lot of time dealing with the Iranians over the last few months. Sometimes I find them extremely confusing as negotiators. But look, we had a little press conference. They obviously don't quite have the same First Amendment protections in Iran that we have in the United States of America. We talked to you guys and then had a series of really good meetings. What I did find kind of funny is that after that initial meeting, there was this, sort of social media firestorm where everybody said the Iranians are going to leave, and then we proceeded to talk to them for like the next 9 hours. So I would just encourage the media, mistrust a little bit what you see coming out of Iranian social media. They can be confusing negotiators, but we feel like we're making progress. Thank you.
The mental gymnastics that politicians are capable of never fails to surprise me. But yeah, he was snubbed. And, at the end of the day, in terms of the Iranians being tough negotiators and being frustrating and unpredictable, I mean, you attacked their country illegally. You killed their top spiritual leader and hundreds and hundreds of children in the first day of attacking their country. Why would you think that that's weird? And regardless, he spun it off in a good way and just pivoted and answered a different question like politicians do. Because J.D. Vance and the way that his rhetoric has changed as well is because he has broader political ambitions. He wants to become president one day. And so he is saying things without saying things and twisting and answering questions that were not asked to him in order to present himself in a certain way for the future. Because he does have future ambitions, and that's why he's presenting himself in this way. Donald Trump, however, really has embarrassed himself, and there's really no way of getting around that. Here's the first clip we have here of Trump speaking a whole bunch of nonsense.
Here's a couple of the people. We're doing very well with respect to the Hormuz Strait. We took in more oil yesterday than has ever gone through the strait. You probably see that we have an oil gusher. The strait is totally open. You know that, and we're negotiating. We'll see how that all goes. But we have two things: we have an open strait, and we have a country that will never have a nuclear weapon.
Look, he keeps saying this. I mean, in a way, Trump is the only person that, number one, would have followed Israel into attacking Iran, perhaps. Maybe there's others. But he's the only one that's actually done it. And he's the only one that can lose so terribly and turn it into something of a win. Like, he can convincingly talk like he's winning. And when I say convincingly, he can convince himself. Like, you can see that he says things like he normally says them, and he's not out of character at all. But in terms of the Strait of Hormuz being fully open, there are still restrictions in the Strait of Hormuz. It's not fully open. Now, Iranian and Chinese vessels are going through. But because of his rhetoric over the weekend, threatening again to commit war crimes, essentially to take out the Iranian negotiating team, which is violating the first clause in his memorandum of understanding. Because of that, Iran, and also the violations in Lebanon, depending upon which reports you trust, decided to close the Strait of Hormuz again. So nothing he's saying is correct. And he keeps on talking and pivoting to no weapons of mass destruction. They will never have a nuclear weapon. I mean, again, like, you haven't gotten anything. Like, there's actually nothing that you've got to support this notion, even if, that was truly your goal all along, which it wasn't. Like, the U.S. has never actually, in my opinion, the U.S. has never actually cared about the whole nuclear weapons thing. Now, do they want Iran to have a nuclear weapon? Absolutely not. Because if they get a nuclear weapon, then that means you cannot overthrow their government. It's going to be incredibly hard to do so, right? That's the real reason. But the whole reason that a nuclear weapon is a threat, to who? It's not a threat. So it's nothing to do with that. Their whole objective is regime change. That's it. They want a submissive Iran. And the Israelis who spearheaded this campaign, they wanted to collapse the Iranian government, or lead to a scenario that would collapse the Iranian government. And they've failed. The Iranian government is stronger. The Iranian government has greater influence over the region now. That's undeniable. We're already seeing this materialize in the way that the Arab Gulf states are behaving. But to the point of Donald Trump making his statement, which made the Iranians declare that they're going to close the Strait of Hormuz because he violated the memorandum of understanding, look at him here when he's asked a question, and he wants to say that he's going to bomb Iran. He literally holds himself back. So the Iranians, because they've pressured back and told him, they've told the Trump administration not to use this rhetoric, the Trump administration is refraining from, like, Trump himself, he's refraining from saying what he wants to say. And you can see this here in this clip.
I think it would, but if it did, but no, if Iran doesn't live up to their agreement, or if they're not behaving, I will do what I have to do.
I'll do what I have to do. Now, that's not born out of nothing, because every single time he's been talking about, I'll bomb the hell out of them, we're going to bring them back to the Stone Age, all of the rest of it. He's not saying that anymore. Now, he may tomorrow change his mind and threaten to annihilate a civilization. That's Trump. But it's interesting that because of the pressure coming from Iran, that rhetoric has changed. And again, I'm not somebody that's inclined to believe that this memorandum of understanding is going to ultimately lead to a deal, because both sides, or it won't lead to it in 60 days, at least in my opinion. I think eventually there has to be a deal. There's just no other way around it. Even if it goes back, there's a resumption of the fighting. Eventually there has to be a deal. And the resumption of the fighting is not necessarily going to give the US any cards. In fact, it could make it harder for the US. Iran could end up extracting even more than it currently is. But, the US is already in such a weak position. And you're seeing this in terms of what even the president, what he says, and we're used to a lot of lies in his rhetoric. But if we're going to listen to what he's saying, I mean, this is a massive backtrack.
Won't use profits from oil sales to rebuild their military and just
well, they're not supposed to be doing that, so we'll see, but they're supposed to use money to buy food for their people, because right now their people are very hungry, and they're buying it exclusively from us. Corn, soybeans, should be a lot of money. I hope it's a lot of money.
See, this demonstrates to you that Donald Trump doesn't know his own agreement, because what was leaked to the press is not that funds that are used from oil sales are going to be used to purchase U.S. goods. And there's nothing to confirm that, by the way. But he's talking about, well, we're going to take the sanctions off and then they're going to buy U.S. goods. And then he's mixing that in with, well, they're 91 million population, they can't feed them, which also is inaccurate. They can feed their own population. You know, the Iranians have managed to adapt to the sanctions, even though things are hard. Objectively, it's very difficult for the average Iranian. But that being said, they have now put out I believe it's a 30-day waiver so that the Iranians can sell their oil sanction-free. Again, this is unprecedented. Iran has not been handed such opportunities since the Islamic Revolution in 79. So this entire time that Iran has been placed under such hardcore sanctions, it's never been granted the ability to simply operate normally, right? And not under sanctions or under direct war, because the Iran-Iraq war erupted. The US backed Saddam Hussein into attacking Iran, and that war lasted for about 8 years. So Iran has never had the chance, at least the Islamic Republic has never had the chance to succeed. Now it's getting that. Now it is suddenly, with its alliance, that it has built back up. And this is part of the calculation, by the way, with Lebanon, because Iran wants to demonstrate it will stand up for its axis of resistance. It will stand up for its allies. And in doing so, that projects power across the region. Not only do they have a ground front that they can wage against the Israelis from southern Lebanon, but also they don't renege on their promises. If they say something, they mean business, and they're not going to allow the Israelis to get the better of them. They will stand up to them and they will bash them into submission. That's what they're trying to communicate to the entire region. And it's been rather successful. And we'll talk about a number of different ways it could prove a massive success in the future in other spheres in the region. But before we get to that, there's been quite a lot that has been reported about what's been going on the ground in Lebanon. And it has been pointed out, and I spoke about this very briefly last week, that Hezbollah have, in essence, hunted down the killers, or those implicated, at least, in the killing, belonging to the exact same 52nd Battalion in the Israeli military that were responsible for killing Hind Rajab in the Gaza Strip. And for you, those of you that don't know about the story, I won't repeat it in its entirety here, but this is little Hind, who was murdered in the Gaza Strip in 2024 by the Israelis, who had besieged her and her family in their car, and then continued on to kill 6 of her family members while she was on the phone to emergency workers from the Red Crescent, and the 2 ambulance drivers that came to evacuate her were murdered along with her in the end, after a long battle to try and reach her and to extract her alive. And of course, there is the Hind Rajab Foundation, which named many of these those who are responsible, and they submitted 24 Israeli soldiers' names, soldiers and commanders who were responsible, directly responsible for the murder. But as we see often when it comes to the international courts and the international legal system, things can take a long time, number one, and the Israelis, quite frankly, even if there are arrest warrants issued for Israeli war criminals, we don't see this actually materialize. We don't see them brought to justice. But in Lebanon, at the hands of Hezbollah's fighters, we have actually seen justice. And what I mean by that is a number of things. Number one, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Ella, the commander of the 52nd Armored Battalion, was injured by Hezbollah in 2024, by the way. 2024. In late 2024, was seriously injured. And then his replacement was also seriously injured. A lot of people don't know that. So that's number one. And then more recently, the Hezbollah managed to take out another commander, Colonel Meir Biederman, who was the commander of the 401st Armored Brigade, under which, of course, is the 52nd Battalion. Then the things developed more, and this is him right here, and he was seriously wounded. Some reports say critically injured. He's been taken off the battlefield and he's been replaced, right? So Hezbollah took him out, and I believe that the clash that they engaged in was from close range. They shot him. So they took him out. They knew who he was, and they actively hunted him because they knew he was a high-ranking official. And then, more recently, in the past few days, things have been developing even more because we'll pull this up here, a story about a battalion commander in the 52nd Battalion. His name is Lieutenant Colonel Dor Gedalia Ben Simon. And he was killed along with 4 others in his tank when attempting to advance on the Ali al-Tahir hills in southern Lebanon. And something to keep in mind here about this, because the Israelis have made a big deal about this. They admitted to losing 5 soldiers within under 48 hours, and then dozens and dozens of them were wounded. And by the way, this battalion commander here was killed in his vehicle along with 3 other soldiers, and was in essence incinerated. And in fact, the Israelis have requested to establish some sort of intermediary or mechanism to reach the armored vehicle that those soldiers were killed in, because every time they get close, Hezbollah uses its anti-personnel rockets to attack the location and brings in drones and attacks the rescue crews. So Hezbollah has been very strict. They're not even allowing them to extract their bodies, which are in pieces, according to the Israeli accounts. There might not even be that much left. It's just going to be rotting flesh at this point. There have been reports that they're fearful that Hezbollah may have taken their remains. But there has been no confirmation of that, of course. But this has been a result, these losses have been a result of Hezbollah specifically targeting vehicles, and Israel has admitted this, that it is capable of targeting vehicles that high-ranking officials in the military are traveling in. They know how to locate them. They have spotters. Their drones are doing reconnaissance around the clock, and they know who they're killing. And they're going after these individuals. So while the international courts, or courts, even domestic courts, where perhaps these soldiers who were implicated in the murder of Hind Rajab, where they travel, while they have failed so far to achieve accountability in not just that war crime, because, you know, that's the murder of one little girl in Gaza, and of course they did make a movie about her as well. But that's just one out of, bare minimum, more than 20,000 children, just like Hind, who were murdered by the Israeli military. Now, all those soldiers who were responsible in serving in the Gaza Strip, even if they weren't responsible for individually killing Hind, they were implicated in tens of thousands of other murders. They were there operating, blowing up homes, indiscriminately firing on civilian populations. This was a genocide. And so every single one of those soldiers serving in that military, every single one of them is responsible for genocide. They committed a genocide. So every single one should be held accountable. But of course they're not, right? They're just not. They don't treat them that way in Western countries, in our international legal system, you know, which was held in such high esteem for so long. Well, the International Criminal Court eventually issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, his former defense minister, and nothing has come out of it. Now, I'm not saying this is not pressure in some way. Of course it is, but Netanyahu is not in cuffs, and neither is Yoav Gallant, and they can still travel to European countries, perhaps until maybe Netanyahu leaves office. Maybe then he might be a bit more restricted. But Hezbollah effectively has hunted down those killers and has been punishing those killers and those who would have given orders to commit operations where untold numbers of civilians, including children, were killed in Gaza and beyond. And it is absolutely correct that Hezbollah has been hunting them down, because they've been locating the most senior officers and they are taking them out. That's what they're doing on the ground there. So justice is served a lot quicker on the battlefield than it is in the international courts, unfortunately. That is what we've learned from this experience, because those international courts, I mean, as we've seen, where are the sanctions on Israel? I mean, people are getting caught up in J.D. Vance saying, hey, Israel, you know, you better not criticize the deal that we're doing, because if you criticize that, well, most of the bombs that you dropped on civilians were built by Americans. And everyone's like, oh my God, J.D. Vance, wow, he's sticking it to the Israel. No, he's not. No, he's mildly criticizing the Israelis. Mildly. And we're like, wow, look at that. That's pushback. You know, that's the pushback you get when you commit a genocide. When your prime minister is convicted or charged, and there's an active arrest warrant for him for committing war crimes, that's the only thing we can hope for. Anyway, talking about the battlefield, Israel right now has been, well, it's halted this advance for a few days now, or about 24 hours or so, but it has attempted repeatedly to try and take the Aliyah Tahrir Hills area in Nabatea, in the Nabatea governance in South Lebanon. And it has been, because it took, and this was a big thing that they advertised, that they took Beaufort Castle. And of course, it's symbolic, but, you know, this is not something that is of as much strategic value as they were advertising at the time. But the Israelis, amidst a ceasefire, they declared a new ceasefire. Israeli Channel 12 openly declared at that time that, and this, Israeli Channel 12 literally declared that a ceasefire does not mean ceasing fire. That, I am quoting them verbatim. That's what they said. A ceasefire does not mean ceasing fire. Out of the horse's mouth. Like, you cannot get any more blatantly ridiculous and just blatantly Israeli than that. Where it's literally the two words that go together to make that a ceasefire. Ceasefire. It doesn't mean ceasing fire. That's what they said. But immediately afterwards, they tried to advance, and they wanted to go towards the al-Tahir hills area, because the Israelis want to reach what they believe is the Badr base, which is built into the hills there by Hezbollah, where they have allegedly missile storage. Now, we don't know exactly what is in there. It does appear absolutely that there is some sort of facility there, unlike in Beaufort Castle, where the Israelis, you know, made their fake discoveries, like we saw them in Gaza. You know, there is a list, and they'd show you like an Arabic schedule, which literally says the days of the week, and he reads it. This means we are in operation. You know, so they did one of those in Beaufort Castle area, where they, you know, there is a list, but there is actually. It does seem there is actually a missile base in this location, the al-Tahir hills area. So the Israelis attempted a number of times to advance. And again, the Israelis are placing great importance on this. Of course, as well, here's a video, and they sort of give it away themselves here, that they've uploaded. This is an Israeli think tank analyzing the north. So these are a series of airstrikes were committed on these hills, where the Israelis are like, yeah, look, we bombed so many targets around there. And evidently, as you're seeing, there's not a whole lot that it's done. So yeah, they've struck this location countless times, and they've not been able to destroy it. The Israeli media briefly put out a story and tried to claim that they'd seized the area and besieged Hezbollah fighters inside of the missile base, which, you know, was objectively not true. What was really happening is, because in order to reach this area, you have to go up on, it's very like, it's open lands, you know, there's nothing that is going to obscure the fact that tanks are heading up in the direction. And because of that, they've been open, and their tanks are just getting blown up. And they're doing it at night. I guess they believe that gives them, that makes it a little bit easier for them. But in fact, it's not, because we've seen the footage emerge. And by the way, this is rocket fire. And Hezbollah, every single time they would advance, and they were trying to advance at one point from three different axes, to reach al-Tahir hills, because it's a high point, essentially. You know, that's what makes it sort of, other than there being a base there, of strategic importance. Here you're seeing a hit on an Israeli tank. I believe that this was the tank that was taken out. That's a guided anti-tank missile that Hezbollah is firing. And again, none of this was released by Hezbollah itself. These are people, like civilians, filming what was happening, and putting these videos out. So we don't actually have real footage. This is also a photo taken. This is from the second day And you can see here the different fires raging from separate military vehicles, which were totally destroyed by Hezbollah as they were trying to advance. And so the Israelis have admitted 5 of their soldiers were killed. Considering the fact that they lost so many military vehicles that were completely destroyed, I don't believe that it was just 5 that were killed, because, you know, we got some reports that appeared to emerge in Israeli media on one of the days that 17 were killed. And in fact, the stories that were coming out, they said, we'll try and reveal the details later, but they were saying this is one of the worst disasters in Israel's history. And then they admit only that 4 soldiers that day died. I mean, how is that you're hyping it up to that extent? There's been other days where Hezbollah has killed 4 of your soldiers. Many other days when they've done that. And in 2024, they did that. I mean, Hamas, in one case that the Israelis admitted to, a Qassam Brigade fighter in Gaza fired one of his Yasin 105 RPGs into a building where Israeli soldiers were planting explosives, rigging a building up with explosives, and it detonated the explosives, right? And it killed like 20 of them in one go. So the way that they hyped it up, and then there's only 4 of them that were killed, and it took so long to release the names of everyone that was killed as well. So I don't believe that nonsense about there only being in total across those 5 days. But because if you look at it, they couldn't get close to retrieve and to tow away their tanks that were destroyed, their armored personnel carriers, and their D9 bulldozers, because when they would go and try and tow them, Hezbollah would drill them with rocket fire. And this is the rocket launcher here, just to demonstrate. This has been translated to English, but this is the M80 rockets that are fired. They're like anti-personnel rockets, and they fired at least 11 waves at one Israeli force that was attempting to reach Ali Tahir Hills. So you could imagine, like, there was a lot of different waves that were fired both those nights that Israel attempted to advance and failed, got crushed, humiliated, battered. But you're talking about so many waves of rockets, so many anti-tank guided missiles. And, you know, you just saw the footage that was released from civilians filming in the area of one of those anti-tank missiles hitting an Israeli vehicle. And afterwards, we saw images of, and even video of these vehicles burning. And we know they're hit with anti-tank guided missiles, either of the Coronet or Elmas anti-tank missiles. And the incident that Israel admitted to, where its battalion commander was killed and incinerated in the side of the tank, was actually using a drone. This was a drone operation that Hezbollah carried out against that specific tank, where they used a more heavy-duty munition opposed to the RPG warheads that they usually use. And it completely destroyed the tank. It was a tank kill hit. And that's why they were killed inside of it. But the amount of tank kill hits we've seen in South Lebanon, the death toll that the Israelis report is just not matching up. And there are so many cases where they just don't admit any of this happening. And again, as we do on every single show here, we're going to show some of the operations which have been revealed in the past few days by Hezbollah, just the FPV drone operations here and what has happened, because it's important to see all of these operations, many of which the Israelis don't actually admit to. And that's an important thing to note. Before we do that, just to remind everyone, we are 100% viewer funded. And if you want to see this show continue to be on the air and to continue to have these breakdowns, we are looking for 300 new members to keep this show alive. So you can join us on Patreon, Mint Press on Patreon, or you can join our membership program on YouTube also. So that being said, we'll get to the footage, and all of these videos that you're going to see were released since we were on the stream last Thursday, just so everyone is aware. These are the latest videos. So again, we're seeing these drones. The Israelis have failed months and months and months of these drone operations and whining and complaining about the fact that Hezbollah is hitting them and they have no solutions. And they've been telling the world we're going to come up with a solution. And the best they have are nets and sort of trying to camouflage their vehicles. That's a D9 bulldozer there. See, they're getting a little bit more innovative here. Like you see that the netting is a little bit different. So they're getting a little bit more innovative in terms of trying to hide their vehicles. Not working at all, complete failure. And see, these drones, again, at this point, Israel has sort of given up and trying to even combat them, it seems. They have no options here. Another tank hit. And it seems to be aiming for that area, that weak spot there, where the turret is. And these drone operators are becoming more advanced, which it does show you that Israel is not proving capable of even getting to the drone operators. It has no idea where they are, where they're operating, and how to properly combat them. They just they continue to get more advanced, and they know what to look for as well now too. You see they're striking logistical vehicles. And this is all in the Beaufort Castle area now, these clips that you're seeing. And one thing to note is that Hezbollah is loading different kinds of warheads as well onto these drones so that it's using the correct kinds of munitions. This is a command center which Hezbollah located, and it's hitting that command center directly. So they've set up in this building, and Hezbollah obviously monitors. They have their teams that monitor the Israelis, their movement. They monitor them with drones as well, but they have spotters in the area, and they're able to locate where the Israelis are setting up these command centers. They're able to, and the Israeli media are actually complaining about this frequently now. They're complaining that not only are they able to hit the command centers and they can go after things like air defense and all the rest of it, but they're able to find out which vehicles, if there's a convoy, which vehicle is the most valuable to target in terms of the personnel inside of it. Which vehicle has a commander inside? Which vehicles are the most high-ranking Israeli officials going to be traveling in, and they're hitting them directly. So that's something also to note. And again, in the same Beaufort Castle area, and you're seeing, this is an area where Israel constantly tells us it has, complete control and it's not going to abandon its occupation of these areas because this helps it defend the northern communities, apparently. And something of note here is that Hezbollah are releasing the footage of these drones that are going, and they're actually hitting tanks that are covered by these nets. And these nets are just not proving effective. Now, there is some evidence that they were catching some of these drones before, but Hezbollah has, they're innovators, so they've come up with solutions to that. And they've managed to attach more sensitive tips to the warheads so that they ensure that the drones explode. And every single hit, regardless of whether it's a tank kill hit, regardless of whether it destroys the vehicle entirely, or if that vehicle has soldiers in it or not, it does not matter. Those drones are super cheap. Max a few $100 it's costing Hezbollah to build these drones, load a warhead onto it, and then fly it into a military vehicle that costs millions of dollars, even if you badly damage it. I mean, it's a logistical nightmare for the Israelis to constantly have to tow these military vehicles where the tracks are getting blown off of these things, where, they're becoming useless. They're being rendered useless. Just about as useless as could be. And the Israelis now, of course, are having a real cry about this. They're not happy at all. And that goes into what we were looking at the start. See, the Israelis admitted 5 soldiers killed, 13 injured. I mean, the injured as well, they keep coming out with different numbers. I saw 16 somewhere, 17. I have come to the conclusion that in that period of time where they said 5 soldiers were killed, I'm going to just multiply everything by 10. And that's my assumption of what they're telling the truth. And again, for those who are just tuning in, the reason why is because, again, we cannot trust anything the Israeli media say. And actually, something I want to note about that story right here, that the 5 soldiers were killed. So the 5th soldier was announced another day, right? Oh, the absolute goal these people have to put up this for soldiers that were actively invading a country, ethnically cleansing a population after their military just engaged in a genocide. What a joke. Anyway, so something to note is that the Israeli media, they initially announced the first 4 soldiers that were torched inside of their tank. They announced that by the time they actually got to announcing that, who had admitted it first? Actually, Mark Levin. Before the Israeli media admitted that 4 of its soldiers were killed in one incident, right? Keep that in mind. Mark Levin, because he couldn't hold his mouth, right? He couldn't hold his mouth. He had got the information from some contacts he has over in the Israeli media who knew there was an incident, a single incident, where a military vehicle was detonated by Hezbollah and 4 soldiers were torched, incinerated. He had those details. He knew that had happened before the Israeli media had reported it. Before they had reported it. So that tells you, again, how untrustworthy the Israelis are. Because he said that, he could go in and complain online about, how our poor soldiers who, in the midst of, a genocide and committing ethnic cleansing and occupying another country illegally, how dare the indigenous population fight back, right? But he reported it before the Israeli media, and that goes back to this, 15 articles per day. The Israeli media cannot report on average, according to a Freedom of Information request made by +972 Mag. And I'm going to keep referring back to this because it's important to note that the Israelis lie about everything. They do not tell the truth, and they've been caught lying time and time again. And while we're on that subject, there's another front that I believe we should be paying attention to, because if you've been looking at the rhetoric coming from IRGC officials like Ismail Qani, who's the head of the IRGC's Quds force, he's been giving interviews where he's been talking about all of the elements of the axis of resistance, so Iran's regional alliance, have become stronger, and actively talking about, interestingly, that Hamas have been getting stronger in Gaza, and they've been rebuilding their military capabilities, which was something I took note of. But that being said, something to watch is developments that are popping up to do with Yemen. Now, this, again, is not confirmed, and I don't want to say that this is going to absolutely happen here. But if the Ansarullah government, and just to summarize for people, Ansarullah, or the Houthis, right, that they're called in Western media, wrongfully, that's not their name. The Ansarullah have a government, and they obviously control the Yemeni armed forces. The majority of the Yemeni armed forces sided with them in 2015, right? They control the capital city of Yemen. They control the biggest, portion of Yemen. They are the only group that is actually independent and not just propped up by a foreign country and their agenda, right? And we saw that with the Southern Transitional Council of the United Arab Emirates when the UAE, decided FAFO and that they really caught it. Saudi Arabia decided to just crush them and put the UAE back in their place inside of Yemen. That happened earlier this year. But there is a chance now, I would say, that Ansarullah could go down to Aden and end up liberating Yemen. That is a result that could come of this agreement. If it does, either, again, materialize, if everything goes through with the memorandum of understanding and there is a deal, either it goes through or we're in this weird state of limbo, between having no deal and Iran gets some of the benefits. Iran, regardless, will have a very powerful position in the region. And I think at this time, Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia controls the opposition, which is sometimes, it's referred to by the so-called international community as the government of Yemen. But, realistically speaking, there's no actual president anymore. And the internationally recognized government of Yemen, of course, was created in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Riyadh, and so it's being propped up. Their rule is being propped up. And I believe, again, one of the consequences here could be that Ansarullah may end up uniting Yemen. And I don't think that's 100%, but I think that they have enough leverage at this point where Saudi Arabia, which is now using the Red Sea, right? It's using the Red Sea in order to sell its oil, and the Red Sea is very important to it. It doesn't exactly want to lose its ability to use the Red Sea and get choked by Ansarullah, because interestingly enough, Yemen was the one that was subjected to the medieval siege for all those years by Saudi Arabia, by the United States and its allies, which ended up resulting in the largest portion of the 400,000 plus Yemeni who died as a result of the war. That was, the vast preponderance of those who died was large. It was largely to do with the sanctions, not the actual direct bombing in the war. Although, of course, an enormous amount of people were actually killed. So because of this position, I believe that Iran might actually have a little bit more sway now over Saudi Arabia, again, if things are to remain the same. And Saudi Arabia might not want to get entangled in this conflict again. They might allow and strike a deal with Sana'a to unite the country. I think that is something that is possible to come as a result of what we're seeing occur in the region. That is actually a very realistic outcome for Yemen. And we'll get into that a little bit more in another episode. But it's important to note that now on the Lebanon front, Israel has been squeezed to the point where, and I'm sure we'll see the footage emerge from Hezbollah, they'll release it all, what's been happening with the failed Israeli advances during a ceasefire. But what we can see is in Lebanon, Israel has no options whatsoever. It's also being pressured to the point where it will have to actively go against the will of the United States, which for whatever reason, whether it's genuine about a deal or not, right now has pressured Israel because of Iranian threats not to attack Beirut, and to, at the very least, they're limiting. And last week, well, it was not even a week ago, the Israelis, within about a 24-hour period, killed around 120 people inside of Lebanon, all of them civilians. And what's happened is it's clear that Iran can put pressure on the Israelis, that Hezbollah can effectively defend South Lebanon. The real question here is Gaza and the Gaza front, because Israel keeps escalating its attacks on Gaza. And realistically, there's two options that Hamas has. And I'm just going to be blunt. Unless Iran intervenes and threatens Israel on behalf of Gaza, which it can do. But if, for whatever reason, Iran does not speak up for Gaza and demand that Israel stop its attacks in Gaza, eventually, what will end up happening is that Hamas will have to make a decision to launch offensive action against the Israelis. And now, I'll be very clear, Hamas will most likely not launch any sort of small-scale operation against the Israelis. The reason being is very simple. If they fire some rockets or take out a tank or something like that, Israel will respond by killing 200-300 people in one night. And everyone knows that. That's just what Israel does. There's no humanity, there's no decency. They don't do war, they do genocide. They like to slaughter children. You know, that's what they do. So Hamas would be, you know, taking a massive gamble to just do some small operation. So what will end up happening is Hamas will be forced into a position, if Israel doesn't allow for the ceasefire to go to another phase, if Israel prevents reconstruction material from coming in, like it's been doing, if Israel keeps escalating its bombardment of the civilian population, if Israel continues backing, arming, and of course giving funds to its 5 different al-Qaeda-linked, Daesh-linked terrorist thug gangs that operate, their death squads that operate inside of the 60% of Gaza that Israel stole, eventually Hamas, Islamic Jihad, the PFLP, DFLP, Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades of Fatah, all of them that are operating there in the Gaza Strip, all of the armed groups, will most likely, and I would say it's most likely going to be led by Hamas, will launch a massive operation against the Israelis. And this, they will know, will probably be, if they're pushed into a dire circumstance, if the Israelis go all in, or not all in, if they commit terrible massacres and they are going to try and do things like that, Hamas will respond with a massive operation. I have no doubt about this. And as a result, obviously we know the horrors if Israel survives this assault. If as a result of that, immediately the whole entire region is dragged back into the war, which means that Iran, by necessity, it should be a strategic imperative that they deal with the Gaza issue here, because the entire reason why there was a chain of events which led up to the assassination of Ayatollah Khamenei and Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, was because of Gaza. If it wasn't because of Gaza, none of that would have happened. None of those war fronts would have opened, right? So it actually is something that strategically the Iranians should actually do, is demand Gaza. That's why I would say at some point I am inclined to believe that the Iranians will include Gaza. Not just because it's a moral issue, like with Lebanon. And Lebanon, by the way, it's a moral issue. There is a big support base in the Islamic Republic who do support the Islamic Republic, and they do support it because of their belief system, ultimately. And they believe that it is a moral obligation to support Lebanon. But they also believe it's a moral obligation to support Palestine as well. And so I believe that in the strategic calculations, when push comes to shove, if Israel starts going in, Iran would be making a dramatic mistake. It would be making a historic mistake if it did not intervene and threaten in order and use its leverage in order to get a lasting ceasefire in Gaza eventually. And it will come back to bite it if it doesn't, in my opinion, because we'll be back in that same cycle. The reason why the Israelis went into this frenzy for almost 3 years now, where they've attacked every single one of their neighbors in some way, shape, or form, is because of the fact that they were dealt such a devastating blow by Hamas on October 7. 400 of their soldiers and security forces were killed. Their sovereign command collapsed. And that sent shockwaves for them. And they realized we can no longer sustain this slow, theft of land and squeezing the Palestinians. And we're going to have to go all out. And if you look at the way that Netanyahu and others talk, one of the things that they advertise is that they changed their military doctrine. And we've actually gone through this on this show a number of times, but just to reiterate, Israel has a doctrine which dates back to the days of David Ben-Gurion, the first Israeli prime minister, of fighting short wars, not engaging in wars of attrition, because Israel wouldn't be able to outlast its opponents because it's just a numbers game. They're too small. Even though they are militarily superior, they have, the backing required to defeat their opponents in short wars, right? They need to be more strategic. The Israelis, in the past almost 3 years now, going on 3 years in October, they've changed that. They've had to fight using a different strategy. And ultimately, their biggest moment, the most success they ever had in this entire period, militarily speaking, has been against Hezbollah, and it was in September of 2024 with the pager attacks and the assassinations, in particular, the assassination of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, the biggest achievements. Now, some people I've seen, they said, well, they collapsed Syria. I disagree with they collapsed Syria. I don't think they collapsed Syria. I think the whole intention originally with the Syria scenario, with the Syrian government falling, and it's true, Iran, don't get me wrong, Iran lost the ability to have an ally there between themselves and Lebanon, and a base of operations, right? So they did lose things. Don't get me wrong. I'm not stating that they didn't. But the way that the government in Syria fell was not actually because of war. In fact, something much worse could have actually come out of that scenario, in my opinion. And that would have been if they got what they wanted. And what they wanted, I think, was to take a portion of Syrian territory around Aleppo and wage a massive war, which would have brought the region in and drained Iran's resources. I think that's what they were going for. In fact, if you see the fall of the Syrian government, there was a process when the Hayat al-Tahrir al-Sham, the al-Qaeda offshoot, which Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, or now Ahmad al-Shara, headed from Idlib, right? This is the most powerful group out of all of them. You'll see that when they headed into Aleppo, they set up like this dollar store Abu Ubaidah. For those that don't know, Abu Ubaidah is the spokesperson for the Qassam brigades of Hamas. And they had this guy who literally mimicked down to a T, like the way that Abu Ubaidah spoke. Maybe I could pull it up in a future show so I could show you all it. But they had that guy that was there. They were building this whole thing that they were going to seize territory and there's going to be a resistance. That, I think, was the calculation. That, in my opinion, would have ended up being somewhat more damaging because it would have drained so much resources. It would have meant, and although, of course, when the new leadership in Syria came in, there were mass sectarian killings, and still we have clashes and all sorts of just, rivalry between tribes, the latest of which has popped off in Aleppo, which is ongoing right now. There's clashes between the tribe and the what is now the Syrian security forces in the area. There's a lot going on. But if things were to have gone in the direction of a renewal, full-scale renewal of the Syrian civil war, it would have been horrendous. It would have been horrendous. And I think that would have perhaps been more damaging. But with the fall of the Syrian government, what's happened is that Ahmad al-Shara has been exposed, of course, for being a collaborator with the United States. It's very obvious. Nobody can deny it. He's a pro-American leader who plays basketball with CENTCOM. Anyone denying it is just delusional. And the only arguments they can give in favor of him is, well, we wanted Syria to be good economically. To which, if your whole entire aim was for Syria to be better economically, why did you do a civil war then? Why didn't you just have the old rule of Assad? Then you're going to come to human rights abuses and you're going to come to all these different excuses, right? But that's not what you're giving me now. Now you're giving me, well, no, it's not about the fact that our government is corrupt and does human rights abuses. And now, instead of all those things that we accused the former government of, now on top of that, we're basically doing the US's bidding in the region. And we can't defend ourselves as Israel invades and occupies our villages and kills our people and destroyed all of our strategic weapons, right? And we fought this big war for over a decade, right? With all of the countries in the entire region, from all over the world, all the superpowers involved in some way, shape, or form. Maybe, China, not as much. All of this, so you could overthrow the regime and change the nature of it and all of this, so you could get a pro-US puppet in there. And then your excuse at the very end, is, well, we need the economy to do better. Again, if you wanted a good economy, before the war, Syria had a great economy. Economically speaking, great economy. Some of the best universities in the entire region. No foreign debt. You could definitely feed yourself. You definitely had electricity. You had those things. Government jobs, yeah. A massive crisis with a vast majority of your population, fleeing somewhere else or wanting to flee still, even after you remove the person that you want to remove. Because again, in Syria, what has happened, and why I'm going through all of this, is what has happened is with the new Syrian leadership, it's chaotic. there's not actually, a real leadership in place like there was before. And out of this chaos, Iran has been capable of supporting Hezbollah out of this chaos. So for those people, we wanted to get Iran out of Syria. Nope. Now, Iran is not inside Syria and it's not got people there and all of that. But in terms of weapons getting over the border into Lebanon, yeah, they're coming over still. They're coming over. They've been coming over. And, a part of the Syrian Arab army before it collapsed, right? A part of their arsenal was transferred into Lebanon. So again, all of this in Syria, what it's done is exposed that Idlib-based opposition for being exactly, this is the thing, the exact thing that they accused the former regime of being. They've just got the exact same setup, but a pro-American one in the way that they've described it. Except, of course, things are worse economically now. They've got people that can't actually deal with the situation. Things get even worse. So for the average Syrian, the situation is, it sucks, right? That things have not gotten better, even though the sanctions have been lifted, even though Syria has now got access to its resources, things have not got materially better. However, for Hezbollah, has this destroyed them? Absolutely not. Israel was not solely responsible for destroying Syria. The thing that destroyed Syria in the end, that completely collapsed the government anyway, I mean, destroyed Syria. Syria was destroyed in 12 years, right? Largely through warfare in terms of its physical destruction and damage done. But in terms of the thing that led to the collapse of the government, the regime change, that was the US and EU sanctions. That's what led to the fall, not Israel. Now, Israel wanted it, of course, for sure. And Israel moved into the country. But again, what's it gaining from being a little bit further into Syria for this period? Because eventually it's going to have a backlash. You can't remain occupying that land forever. And I will remind people, it took a long, long time to liberate South Lebanon. And it might take a long time to liberate southern Syria. But Israel's in a lot weaker position now. So anything could happen, And here's something to think about. Sometimes situations where the U.S. has installed a government doesn't go to plan. Doesn't exactly go to plan. The U.S. backed Saddam Hussein. The U.S. put Saddam Hussein into his position as Iraqi president. And they took him out as well because they and Israel didn't like the direction he was going in. So there's many different things there to look at. But in terms of the outcomes, Israel's biggest victory came in the form of what they did in September of 2024. And that has all been undone by Hezbollah. They haven't defeated Hamas. They haven't defeated Hezbollah. They were never fighting the Syrian government, by the way, in the Syrian Arab army. Like Bashar al-Assad didn't declare war on Israel. There were some groups that were backed by Iran inside of Syria that occasionally would fire. And they did. But some of these groups, by the way, there were some groups inside of Syria that are aligned with Iran that fired during the 40-day war that we just had as well, by the way. They're still operating inside Syria. But that being said, they didn't defeat the Islamic resistance in Iraq. They didn't defeat Ansarullah in Yemen, not even close to it. And they haven't defeated Iran, so they haven't won anywhere. Where did they win? Where did they actually inflict a military defeat on their opposition? Nowhere. And because they've failed, their dream of the greater Israel is nothing more than the pipe dream that it was to begin with. Greater Israel is further away now, assuming that this outcome with Iran will be the ultimate outcome, because Iran has essentially won this war, right? And even if, even if they go back to war, what are they going to achieve? They can't achieve anything. They can't win against Iran. So even if the US goes back to war with Iran, what are you going to hope to achieve there? Bombing infrastructure? Okay, cool. Like all of the infrastructure of the Gulf Arab states gets eliminated too. So your allies, where Trump has his own personal business deals in the Gulf, right? Forget that. The trillions of Gulf investment, forget that. Forget any investment from those Gulf states. They're just going to be trying to pick up the pieces and recover. So forget the investment, right? Forget your Middle East allies other than Israel, which will also take a huge hit, which you're probably going to be asked to pay for as well. Which is why perhaps, and this is a consideration, there might be those that we will consider the deep state inside of the United States that have got involved at this point and said to the Trump administration, hey, here's what you're going to do. We're not allowing this situation to go any further. That might have been what's happened here. That might be what's, and again, I'm not saying this with 100% confidence, but what could be happening, this is my opinion, is that the Israel lobby, which obviously controls politicians and finance the Trump campaign, the Israel lobby has an enormous sway. The Trump administration is probably, like, in my opinion, one of the dumbest administrations I've ever seen. It's just so stupid from start to finish in terms of those who they put in control. But there are people behind the scenes who actually make everything work, right? So at the end of the day, you need people to actually make the whole machine function. And I believe what may have happened here is that they've stepped in and said, hey, this is untenable. We're going to really badly impact ourselves economically. We're not going to drag down our entire system because Israel wants us to engage, not in a war for a reason, not with any specific goals, not with a strategy, just to keep bombing until, I guess, they like what they see. That's dumb. That doesn't make any sense. And the reality on the ground had to have set in at some point where the Trump administration, despite them wanting to do everything for Israel, they were told, hey, pack it in. This is done. You lost, right? And I'm sure the Israel lobby is pushing back. I'm sure. But who will win? Will the actual state itself, will the government itself, at the end of the day, protect itself over Israel? And I believe that's what we're seeing right now, is that you have a government that has been almost all but captured by the Israel lobby. That is the Trump administration. And what's happened is they have basically sold themselves so much to the point where they've gone into this disastrous war, and they're having to lie to the population about a lot of the results of this war. But they've had to go to this disastrous war, and they've got no results from this. Everything is worse than before. Iran is stronger. The US has just been embarrassed on the global stage, has got absolutely nothing. Iran is coming out of this a winner with its head held high and still in a strong position, and not believing that the US will not go back on its conditions, and using force to pressure the US side to stay at the negotiating table. They're the strong party here. So I believe there could be that struggle that's happening internally right now. That could be what's happening. Again, we'll have to see. But when it comes to the Israelis, if this all turns out the way that it's looking, goodbye. And Israel, again, I'll say it again, the only way that it survives, and this is the pro-Israel solution, is a two-state solution, which is not favorable to the Palestinians, by the way. But that's the only way it survives. The only way. If it continues attempting to conquer every country around them and talking about, oh, in 15 years from now, we're going to be at war with Egypt. And in 5 years, we're going to be at war with Turkey. And we're going to be at war with Jordan at some point. And they're not even attacking you. They've literally done nothing to you. And you haven't even beaten Hezbollah. You haven't even defeated Hamas, which is literally in a tiny little strip of land, which you have full monitoring over, and you have surveilled, and you have besieged, fully besieged, with drones 24/7, all of this. Since 2006, you've had your siege, right? Really, maybe in 2005, to be honest with you, the actual siege. They reinforced the siege in 2006 and made it worse in 2007, right? But you can't even defeat Hamas, the weakest in Iran's axis, the weakest link. You couldn't defeat them. And you're talking about going to war with Egypt and oil. Well, what are you gonna do? March on Ankara? Are you insane? But eventually, if they're gonna go down this path of trying to attack everyone and continue, they are going to implode. It's gonna be it. It's gonna be over. And the military solution, it's gonna be forced on them. They do not have enough soldiers to continue fighting on multiple fronts. They don't. They're running out of soldiers. They barely have enough soldiers to fully commit to a proper campaign in Lebanon. They need 10 times the amount of soldiers they're talking about when they're talking privately. I don't think it's that amount of soldiers that they necessarily need. But they need so many more soldiers that they're crying about it on their own shows and in their own media, that they don't have enough soldiers to commit to a proper ground campaign in Lebanon. So how are you going to actually win? You can't. You're just going to keep fighting and fighting and fighting forever. And then even if Israel signs that so-called two-state solution, its population are so psychotic at this point that they won't accept it. And they might start fighting against each other. It is a failed project. And this is the first nail in the coffin, is their failure here to defeat any, not even a single one of the Iranian-led axis. The fact that they couldn't defeat any of them. First nail in that coffin. And I truly believe that. I don't think they have any way out of this. The only possible way is for them to submit. But again, even looking at the way that they're behaving in Lebanon, they can't even withdraw, even when it's in their interests. Because you think that you're going to go, like, Israel could be up, deep into Lebanon. It could take Sur. It could go, you know what? Israel could make it to the southern suburbs of Beirut. Here's something for everyone's knowledge. Israel could, hypothetically, if it made it all the way to the southern suburbs of Beirut, ballistic missiles inside of Lebanon could still be fired at Tel Aviv. They could still be fired at Tel Aviv from Lebanon. In fact, I'll say something even more to add to this. Ballistic missiles could be launched from a few hundred meters away from where Israeli soldiers are stationed in Lebanon and hit Tel Aviv in Lebanon. Anywhere in Lebanon, let's just say. You know why I know this to be a fact, that this could happen? And that going deep inside Lebanon, our security zone and the yellow line and all that does nothing? You know why I can say that with confidence? Because in Gaza, in areas like Beit Hanun, in northern Gaza, Israel flattened everything. Israel put its troops, and you know what? 100 meters away from Israeli soldiers gathered around with all their tanks, Hamas fired a batch of rockets that went to Tel Aviv. Over a year into the genocide. I think it was almost like not the 2-year point, year and some change. So you think you can stop Hezbollah firing? No. Now this is just the reality. This is just the reality. So while Israel can still kill civilians and still kill children, I mean, again, I say this and I stress this a lot. Anyone can kill children. anyone can kill children. It doesn't take somebody that doesn't make you a winner. That means you're a loser. That means you're a coward. That means you're a criminal if you kill children, you kill civilians. You know, it's not a testament to how strong you are. Now, it's horrible. You know, we hate the fact that there are murderers and they impact things badly, and we have to take that into consideration in our society if we just look at it. But again, the guy that can go around and like dog punch like a pregnant woman in the back of the head, right, and then beat up a 5-year-old is not the guy that we're going, oh, that's the heavyweight champion of the world right there. You know, that's not what we're saying about that person, is it? So the Israelis, and eventually that person is going to get punished, even if, let's say, they're a very rich person and they have connections and whatnot. I don't know. Maybe they're a corrupt police officer. They like beating up children and women on the weekend, right? So they've got out of going to jail so far. I'm trying to find a comparison here, right? I'm trying to, come up with on the spot. But all that being said, we've been on here for an hour and 30 minutes. And we'll continue to look at all of the news as it develops, of course, and cover everything and try and break it down as it comes in. We'll cover the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between. But before we jump off here, if you have made it this long into the live stream, please do hit that like button. Please do share this video. Put a comment down below in the comment section. That does help us with the algorithm. Let us know what you think. And of course, as well, please, follow us, subscribe, stick around as well, and make sure you're around for our next show on Thursday, same time, 4 p.m. CST. And for those who want to help keep this show alive, we are looking for 300 new members. You can join us on Patreon. You can join us here on YouTube on our membership program. We want to keep this show alive. We want to continue to bring these breakdowns and just, honest breakdowns of what's going on, and try and inform everyone, all of our viewers here, with complete transparency on what's going on, break these issues down, and sort of travel through this all together so that, everyone is properly aware. A lot of people are not aware of what's going on. And like the videos that we're seeing from on the ground, from Hezbollah and from other groups, a lot of people are not seeing this stuff, right? The corporate media, if they show you anything, there's such a spin that is put on it. So we do want to continue, doing these shows. So that will be contingent upon your support. And for those who already support us, we thank you so much. And we will see you next time. So until next time, we will be back with more. Take care, and we'll see you on Thursday.